Ladies and gentlemen, dear experts, welcome to Cole CP Training of Trainers course. This sequence is on working with groups. In this sequence, we are going to cover 4 points. 1. Different types of meetings. 2. Steps in conducting a meeting. 3. Functions and role of the facilitator. And 4. A summary. Different types of meetings. The top-down briefing. When the meeting facilitator conducts a top-down information meeting, the objective is to be heard and above all understood by the participants. A top-down briefing consists of 2 main phases. 1. Briefing. To give information to a group of people in the form of a presentation or a briefing before an exercise. 2. Exchange or feedback. In a second step, and to ensure the objective is achieved, the exchange or feedback phase allows participants to be given the floor. They can then ask any questions they wish. Depending on the questions, the facilitator provides additional explanations and clarifications if necessary. The bottom-up briefing. This type of meeting aims to gather information from the participants by interviewing a group. A bottom-up briefing consists of 3 main phases. 1. Framing. The facilitator, in addition to specifying the timing, objectives, and methods, etc., asks participants a starting question in order to obtain the information. 2. Group interview. The second phase is when the participants give their answers or answer to the question asked by the facilitator. 3. Clarification. Here, it is the facilitator's turn to ask questions of clarification in relation to the information provided by the group on the theme. If the facilitator wishes to collect quality information, it is crucial that they pay particular attention to include everyone and therefore to collect all opinions, to welcome all opinions with benevolent neutrality, not to intervene personally in the content of what the participants say, rephrase information presented to ensure a clear understanding, including that of the group, summarize clearly the opinions presented. The decision-making meeting. As the name suggests, a problem-solving or decision-making meeting is intended to solve a problem and or make a decision on a problem. Solving a problem or deciding in a group implies the adoption of a certain methodology consisting of 4 phases. 1. Definition of the problem. This involves identifying and making explicit the common objective pursued by the group. The facilitator defines the question that needs to be answered or the problem that needs to be solved. 2. Inventory of opinions. In relation to the question asked, the theme of the discussion or the problem to be solved, the facilitator invites participants to generate ideas, share their opinions, communicate information, or suggest solutions. 3. Verification of opinions and formulation of assumptions. The aim here is to methodically evaluate the ideas, information, opinions, and possible solutions previously expressed by comparing them with the common objective formulated during the first phase, during an exchange managed by the facilitator and to which everyone is invited to contribute. 4. Decision-making. Here again, through an exchange within the group, a solution is chosen, the course of action that seems best from a realistic and practical point of view. The facilitator makes sure that the decision, course of action, or solution chosen is formally accepted by all. The facilitator will also make sure that everyone has clearly understood the consequences and fully accepts them. If necessary, the facilitator will call the participants back. The decisions must be made explicitly. Steps in conducting a meeting. Before the meeting, preparation. Many people think that a meeting begins when the facilitator and participants are seated around a table. While in some cases this may be true for the individuals who are invited to a meeting, it is not true for the facilitator. Conducting a meeting cannot be improvised. To be effective and meet the objectives, a meeting must be prepared consciously. 1. Materials condition. Invitation. First, the facilitator will have to send an invitation to the participants. They will have to be identified beforehand by the facilitator or another person. This notice must include at least the following: the date of the meeting, duration, the start and end times, the venue, with a map if necessary, full agenda or as complete as possible, and the documents and materials that participants will need to bring with them. Equipment. The facilitator must provide materials needed for the meeting: markers, chalk, transparencies, paper, etc. Space planning. This must also be thought out before by asking various questions such as: does the room have air conditioning? Will there be sufficient lighting? What about acoustics and the general comfort of the participants? How can the tables be arranged so that participants can see each other? Atmosphere and tranquility. It goes without saying that you should avoid premises that are likely to be places with incessant comings and goings. Limit the duration. It is usually advisable that a meeting lasts no longer than 2.5 hours to avoid the well-known saturation effects in participants. Also, regardless of the length of the meeting, the facilitator should allow sufficient breaks. 2. Content and methods. This is where the facilitator anticipates the course of the meeting. How do I feel about the content of the meeting I'm going to attend? Have I done enough research? Who are the participants? Why are they participating? What are their issues? What is the context of the meeting? Is the way of organizing things relevant and appropriate? What difficulties am I likely to encounter? What could I put in place to manage them? 3. A preparation tool, SIOM. SIOM is a framework that can be systematically used for the preparation of a meeting. It will also serve as a basis for the conduct of the meeting. It allows the facilitator to specify what participants are going to do together, to structure their presentation, and to be clear and concise for the participants. SIOM is a framework that can be systematically used for 1. Preparing for a meeting. 2. Facilitating the different phases of the meeting, especially during the introduction. SIOM is an acronym that corresponds to the following headings. 1. Subject, the theme of the meeting. 2. Interest of individuals or groups in attending or participating. 3. Objectives, what you want people to know, understand, or do. The concrete result to be achieved at the end of the meeting. 4. Method, the steps needed to achieve the objectives and the duration for each step. As an example, the SIOM for a management meeting concerning COVID-19 prevention measures in the workplace. The subject, priority hygiene measures to combat the spread of COVID-19 in our company. Interest, what are our obligations? How can we preserve everyone's health? How do we do it? Our challenge is to better understand the directives and advice of the Ministry of Health in order to act effectively in the interest of all. The objectives. Identify the main hygiene measures recommended in the generic employment or labor guide to combat COVID-19. Identify the difficulties we may face in implementing these measures. Decide on priority actions to take to comply with these measures. Method: information on measures, a 15-minute presentation. Discussion on implementation challenges and priorities, 25 minutes allocated. Decision on priority actions to take, 20 minutes. During the meeting, facilitation. When conducting a meeting, the following conditions must be met. 1. Specify the objectives and organization of the meeting. CIOM serves as the basis for conducting the meeting. It allows the facilitator to specify what participants are going to do together, to structure their presentation, and to be clear and concise for the participants. 2. Specify the framework. The facilitator should announce the end time of the meeting at the beginning. This limit should be respected. Any extension should ideally be negotiated with the participants. If participants know each other a little or not at all, it is essential to introduce them or to ask them to do so. The facilitator should make sure that participants know in what capacity each person is present. 3. Organize a record of the meeting. The facilitator alone cannot both facilitate and report on the meeting. So at the beginning of the meeting, the facilitator should call for a volunteer to act as a secretary or designate someone to do so. 4. Facilitate the meeting. The facilitator should ensure that the meeting is conducted well. So they should ensure a facilitating and regulating function. If they are acting in a production function, they should do so explicitly. After the meeting, monitoring and evaluation. 1. Verify the achievement of set objectives. As a first step, the facilitator should ensure that the objective or objectives set in advance and communicated at the beginning of the meeting are achieved, the CIOM. The facilitator should be attentive to the objectives throughout the meeting, and at closing time should recall them and go through them one by one, explaining whether or not they have been achieved. 2. Make a summary. The next step is to present a summary of the meeting. The facilitator summarizes what was discussed, decided, and approved during the meeting. 3. Evaluate the process. Finally, the facilitator evaluates the conduct of the meeting, either by questioning the participants orally or by distributing a written questionnaire. Whichever way it is done, it is important that the facilitator keeps a record of the evaluation so that, if necessary, the next meeting can be arranged. Functions and role of the facilitator. The 3 functions of group facilitation. During a meeting, 3 functions should be considered by the facilitator to ensure the smooth running of a group or to ensure that participants remain sufficiently involved to carry out the planned task. 1. Producing. This includes all interventions, particularly in the form of content, opinion, expertise, information, advice, etc., aimed at achieving the objectives and results of the meeting. This function belongs mainly to the members of the group. In a discussion or decision, for example, the facilitator is not expected to give their opinion or propose the content of the decision. Otherwise, what is the point of bringing people together if the facilitator wants to impose their own solution? If the facilitator intervenes by proposing, producing, they must do so very explicitly and take care not to frustrate the participants. This is all the more important when the facilitator occupies a hierarchical position in relation to the participants, who may perceive the facilitator's proposals as manipulative. 2. Control. This is about managing relationships and interactions within the group. It is an essential task for the facilitator. Ensuring cohesion in completing the task enables participants to remain involved. The facilitator's interventions focus on mutual respect, on inviting everyone to express themselves, on maintaining control of the spoken word, on managing tensions between participants. Their role is to ensure a sufficiently relaxed atmosphere within the group without losing sight of the objectives. 3. Facilitation. It is up to the facilitator to propose a working method to achieve the expected outcome of the meeting. This is also about the tools, visual aids, information sharing, documents that they may make available to the group to facilitate joint work. Facilitating the conduct of a meeting also involves preparation and follow-up. Examples include announcing the objectives of the meeting and writing a follow-up note. The role of the facilitator. To illustrate these functions, the following is a checklist for evaluating the facilitator's work, functions, and identifying the role of the facilitator. 1. Production. The facilitator did not direct the content of the exchanges, did not impose their own solutions. 2. Control. The facilitator kept control of the flow of the speech, ensured that positive interpersonal relationships were maintained within the group, encouraged attitudes of listening and understanding, ensured the dynamism of the participants. 3. Facilitation. The facilitator defines and clarifies the reason for the meeting, defines and clarifies the objective or objectives of the meeting, identified a method for achieving the objective or objectives, kept the group within the framework set, maintained the group within the time limit, made good use of support tools, encouraged the expression of opinions and proposals from all sides, checked the understanding of different members of the group, drew up a final synthesis, verified the approval of the various group members, organized follow-up to the meeting. Summary. Before the meeting, the facilitator is alone and will have to prepare the physical conditions, define the content and methodology, and finally prepare themselves. During the meeting, the facilitator is in the presence of the participants. When opening the meeting, they can use the Scion. They must also welcome the participants, ensure all introductions are made, and invite participants to indicate what they expect from the meeting. During the course of the meeting, the facilitator provides methods and tools, manages relationships, and helps the group to achieve the desired result. At the end of the meeting, the facilitator verifies achievements of the objectives, summarizes and evaluates the progress of the meeting. Finally, following the meeting, the facilitator should organize follow-up by writing a report or minutes as is appropriate, and ideally a summary to be sent to the participants.